Greetings and welcome to Beatle Stuffology. We're two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatle stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I'm very glad to hear that. How have you been since last we spoke?
I have been pretty good, although a couple of days ago, out on the Southwest Coastal Path, I saw my first live UK snake.
Wow.
I know. I was out for a run. And it was only as I got very, very close to it that I realised that it was a snake and just incorporated a bit of a leap into my stride. So I jumped over it and didn't do what everyone else who might have been out running that day might have done, which was probably to stop, take a picture, and create an Instagram reel. But that in itself explains why we are so poor at social media. Um, yeah,
I mean,
there you go.
you say we. I mean, I'm not involved in social media at all. It's
Yeah,
you.
well, yes, but the fact that I'm the better of the two and I'm pretty rubbish is bad. But there was no kind of sense of fear or anything like that because I moved on, and the good lady her indoors has just showed me a picture from her father over in America from his walk up in the hills today, and that picture contains quite a clear footprint of a bear. So I'll take our well, I don't know if it was a grass snake or an adder, but I'll take that over a bear any day.
That seems like a fair choice. That seems like a good idea.
Speaking of, by the way, it's just kind of reminded me actually why it was sort of to draw those topics. Have you been watching the latest series of The Bear?
I haven't seen any of the Bear full stop.
You haven't seen any of The Bear? Okay. I think you would find it very, very interesting, if not for the use of music alone. Series 3 used Strange Currencies.
Oh, really?
Quite a lot. And we watched. I mean, the series has been the season. Sorry, American listeners. The season has been available for a few weeks. We've only just got around to watching the first couple of episodes, and in episode 2, there's a sort of a montage. Well, it is a montage really that plays out to Talk's Life's What You Make It, which is from The Colour of Spring, which is one of my favourite albums of all time. Just absolutely adore that. But it is such a really, really powerful song. And it was quite interesting to notice that some foot tapping from the other side of the room going on. So now I'm trying to work out at what point can I introduce Laughing Stock or Spirit of Eden to the conversation. But I think that might take a little bit of time.
Well,
But I mean, sometimes the choice of tracks can be a little bit obvious. So and even using Life's What You Make It, whilst people were trying to effectively create opportunities for themselves, could have been a little bit kind of like, oh, really? But it was pretty well done and so good to hear an American produced show using that, because up to that point I would have thought that the most common association in America with Talk would have been that Gwen Stefani cover of It's My Life.
Oh yeah. Oh god, I haven't
Which
heard
did
that
at least
for ages.
Yeah, but it did give Mark Hollis quite a lot of money to live the life that he wanted to live. I mean, I don't think it completely made him free of having to do anything, although he didn't really do anything for the last 10 years of his life, but it did certainly make things a bit more comfortable. So, whatever you might think of it, well done, Gwen.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
I,
Shall we stop making our listeners wait for the topic of today's show?
I suppose that we should. The topic of today's show, as beautifully articulated in that flawless link, is of course wait. But we're going to make our listeners wait a little longer. Because we're going to dive into our postbag, just for a nice change.
We really should have a sound effect to go with that.
What sound effect would you like?
A rustling of a bag.
Okay, if I remember when I'm editing this, I'll see if I can edit one in for the sake of our the sake of our listeners and give us a little Foley in the background. That would be lovely. Yes. Good. What was I talking about? Oh, yes, emails. That's the very thing. We have an email from the Netherlands, which is tremendously exciting for me since I used to live there. And it is from Pim Perquin, who writes to us and says, hello, JG and Andrew. I'm a devoted listener from the Netherlands. I find your conversations thoroughly enjoyable and entertaining. Unpolished? Yeah, that's certainly true. Sometimes speculative and exploratory with interesting detours. Occasionally entirely off topic, but always entertaining and witty. Please keep going and try not to get hit by a bus or anything like that. At least not until you know my name and everything that came after. I can't promise that we will be spared impacts by public transport, but I can promise that we'll try our best. I think that's probably what we can manage there. Anyway, in your first podcast, you mentioned that a significant portion of your listeners came from Mexico and Sweden. Just to prevent the image of your audience being solely Mexican and Swedish from becoming too fixed, here is a message from the Netherlands. I'm writing this in Dutch, even though I manage quite well in English, but I'm letting AI do the translation, pretty much for the sake of it. Hey, that's my line. Anyway, first of all, I wanted to respond to your podcast about Michelle. Andrew mentioned that he primarily sees Michelle as a man's name. What immediately came to mind was the image of Paul McCartney performing the song for then President of the USA, Barack Obama, and his wife. Yes, Michelle. I kept waiting for that association to come up, but it didn't. I just wanted to point that out to you. Yes, that sounds like us. You know, this is incredibly obvious thing, and we kind of missed it.
That's a fair point. I suppose the only thing was that as a French name, because it is a song that has Gallic associations, that in French, Michelle is predominantly a male name. So that was the association there. Obviously in the UK and America, it is a female name. But I was just sort of, I guess my point was more that if they were going to go for something French, why not go for something French? But yeah, fair enough. It must be a bit weird though. You're Paul McCartney and you're singing a song to the First Lady of the United States that has vague romantic associations, while her husband, brackets, the most powerful man in the world, is sitting there looking on and going, "Oh, this is quite nice, isn't it?"
Yeah,
it's a bit weird.
Well, yeah. I mean, if somebody's going to hit on your wife, it might as well be Paul McCartney, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it doesn't want us to get run over by a bus, which is nice, but not before you know my name, look up my number. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
correct.
he's okay, fair enough. So he's okay with, he wants recordings of Baby You're a Rich Man and All Together Now, not so bothered about All You Need Is Love. I'm just purely going through the McDonald book at the moment to see where it sits. But
well, it's officially it's the last thing, isn't it? Because it's the B-side of Let It Be,
do it
right?
By releases.
Yeah.
No, that's fair enough.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
fair enough. Yeah. Well, as we'll find out from the next piece of correspondence, our views and the things that we say about some songs don't always match what other people think. And stay tuned for when we get round to Rain, folks.
Yeah, indeed. There's also a further comment about whether we're going to cover Bad Boy, and I think the answer to that is yes. We haven't covered it yet because its UK release was on a collection of Beatles oldies. Disappointed.
Oh, sorry, you're waiting for me to say what gold is.
Thank you. Which is 1966, which we haven't reached yet. So I'm sure we'll find a gap to fill that somewhere.
It's one of George Michael's finest compositions, so I'm sure we'll cover it at some point.
Well, no, I was going to say something very rude about George Michael there, but I've elected not to. Fine, good. Finally this. You will no doubt be aware that the Beatles' single release policy varied per country. I'm familiar with the official UK singles catalogue, but it may be useful for you to know that the following singles were released here in the Netherlands and scored very highly in the charts. I should have known better if I fell 8 days a week. No reply. Yesterday, Michelle, and Andrew favourite, Obladi Oblada. It might be good to know that many of your non-British listeners are familiar with these tracks as genuine hit singles and not only as album tracks. Once again, thank you for all your efforts that you've put in, though I imagine you have a great deal of fun doing it. At least that's the impression you give. I look forward to upcoming episodes. Thanks, Pim. Well, thank you very
What
much,
have I
Pim.
said about obli di obli da?
Well,
I don't remember because we obviously you obviously mentioned this email to me before we started recording, and at that point the only thing that I could think of about obli di obli da was I think the first time that I encountered it was in year six in primary school. And I had no knowledge of the Beatles whatsoever then, but thought it was quite a fun little thing that we had to, I think we had to sing, we had to learn to sing. Um, yeah, but okay, no, yeah, but I get why it's not seen as being A grade Beatles material, but yeah. Anyway, but then as I'm sure we will probably find, there will be times when we will say something about a particular song and then completely contradict ourselves about the same song a few weeks later.
yeah, that sounds about right. I think it's less what you said about Obla Di Obla Da and more the sneering tone your voice takes every time you have to mention the title.
Yeah, well, the title is rubbish. It is utterly rubbish. But there you go.
Fair enough.
There you go. But yeah.
Well, I'm gonna reply to Pim here in person en just say, Pim, hartstikke bedankt voor je e-mail. Ik heb 13 jaar Nederlands gewoond, dus ik spreek een beetje Nederlands. Niet perfect, maar ook niet slecht. So ik doe mijn best hier. Hartstikke bedankt voor je e-mail en tot ziens. And that's it. I'm afraid my Dutch is fairly rusty at the moment, but at least I feel I have made a bit of an effort. Good. Well, we're going to move on to our friend Ken Double N, who says, on the subject of Michelle again, he guesses he was wrong when he thought, who doesn't like Michelle? It would be you two, which, yeah, it sounds like us. I had a bit of trouble listening to how ho-hum your episode felt about it. I don't hear it much differently than I hear Yesterday. Isn't Yesterday also just another love song when it comes down to it? Sure, it may have a little bit of depth by using a longing for yesterday as an alternate means of expressing why it can't start over, but that's all it is, really. No matter how many people have covered Yesterday, it's still basically a solo Paul love song. You can add strings to one and oohs and ahs to the other, and they aren't really that much different from each other when all is said and done. Do you remember being ho-hum and Michelle?
Well, I mean, to which I think he makes excellent points, but they didn't. And that's why. And I think because Michelle has that sort of almost tongue-in-cheek tone to it, it doesn't carry, apologies for puns on different levels, it doesn't carry the same weight as Yesterday. And I think that's why. But then actually, but it's a really good point. And Ken, if you're able to get BBC Sounds, I don't know if you are able to get BBC Sounds outside the UK anymore, judging by some of the messages I've been getting on podcasts I downloaded when on in France recently. Today is Saturday, the 9th of August. Can listen if you can get hold of BBC Sounds. Go into Radio 4, and at about 9:30 this morning, they had something on the Mona Lisa. It was about 10 o'clock, I think it was. Anyway, it was around then. And one of the key points they made about that is that Mona Lisa is not just another painting. It is a very, very good painting, but the reason it has the associations as like the greatest painting, the painting you must see, is not down to the quality of the painting, but some of the things surrounding it. For example, the furore around it when it was stolen from the Louvre in 1911, and the media whipping up such a frenzy about its locations, its associations with the Kennedys in, I think, 62, when it went to America and was put on display and was seen by over 1 million people in Washington, D.C. and New York within a very short space of time. So it built up those cultural associations. And I think Yesterday carries the weight of pop culture history with it. And it has gained that significance because people have given it that significance. So I completely understand why you might get a different emotional response to it than other people. And just in the same way as we get different emotional responses to different songs as well. And I think that's why sometimes we do try and talk about where we first came across these songs, to kind of explain our link to it, because that really does color how we feel about it at the end. Because it may be that, and actually, I thought with Michelle, I thought I did sort of make those links to family holidays as a young person, and so it does kind of have some positive associations with me, whether or not those associations are real or invented. Um, yeah, so yeah, it does have, it has the significance that it has been given, and some people will react against that as well. I tend to see you as someone who is very much in the camp that if everybody else likes it, then I'm going to be absolutely determined not to. But that's more within your sort of wheelhouse, isn't it? To do the Neil Young thing and head for the ditch.
Can't imagine what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I think it is also just worth stating explicitly something that I think has always been implicit in our podcast, which is that we are not in any way, shape, or form aiming for objectivity here. You know, like when we discuss these songs, there are reactions to them, and we'll talk about culture, we'll talk about context, and as the first email noted, we'll often just ramble off course and talk about anything that sort of occurs to us as and when the moment takes us. But it's not about objectivity, it's just about having the opportunity to discuss music that we genuinely truly love and matters to us. And so the way that we react to it is necessarily going to be different from the way that our audience reacts to it or the way that anybody reacts to it. And that's fine. That's kind of the point. These aren't meant to be podcasts which are presenting a definitive view of the band or the music. They're meant to be the start of the conversation, not the conclusion of it. And the fact that we get feedback like this, we get people expressing different opinions, like that's phenomenal. That's the whole point of this exercise is that we get people talking, and hopefully we're not just trotting out the same opinions or the same facts or the same kind of cliches about the Beatles that we all kind of know. It's why we tend to steer away from going too deep into kind of recording details or any of that kind of stuff. We'll mention them when we're going across them, but they're not necessarily things that we're going to do a deep dive on. There's plenty of podcasts out there who do that, and all power to them. But we're just sitting about talking about, our favorite band and the music that we love. And that's kind of what we do, really.
Okay. Shall we then express some of those opinions about the subject of today's episode, almost 20 minutes into it?
Do you think we've made our audience wait long enough now? Yeah, I think we probably should. What do you think of this song, Andrew?
Okay, so in our conversations, I made a little observation, pre-recording conversations, a little observation that thought, oh, that's quite good. So on its own, it's a pretty decent song, but within the album, it doesn't quite stand up to some of the stronger tracks, and it therefore potentially gets a little lost. I think that's the headline for today.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, I think I probably agree with that. I mean, it's something we'll talk about a little bit more when we do our Rubber Soul album summary in a couple of episodes' time. But side two of Rubber Soul is really peculiar. Weight is definitely a part of that. It's not a, well, I don't know. I was going to say it's not a bad song. It's not a bad song. I'm going to sound a bit negative about it, but I don't want people to think I think it's a bad song. I don't. But I don't know that there's a lot of there. It's all the bits are all right. It's all fine, but I find it a dreadfully difficult song to get worked up about.
Okay, well let's get worked up about the things that really do stand out about it, and I will give you Mr. Richard Starkey. Sir, take a bow.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if there's one thing that really stands out in this track, it's Ringo. He's absolutely all over this. Easily the best contribution. He's just fantastic. Even the maracas. Maracas can be so corny, but there's something about the way that Ringo uses them here. They're just great. Like everything just works. He's absolutely putting his all into a song that honestly, like, I think if Ringo wasn't making the effort, this might be, it's quite a limited song musically. There's not an awful lot to it in terms of its musicality, and having Ringo sort of picking up the changes in tempo and just shuffling his way through it. It's absolutely fantastic. There's not a second's doubt in my mind that Ringo is the standout here.
So it's not just the maracas, the tambourine as well. The
God, yeah.
constancy of that is really effective. But then each time they lead into the chorus, it's driven by a fill that really kind of signals, right now, here we go. Here's the what you closest you're going to get to a chorus on this song. And I think that's important too, because yes, that drives a change in tempo, but it also makes it musically much more interesting. Because there are bits in here that do work. And for example, I don't think the bridge really works. But actually, when you listen to it, particularly I think possibly the 2009 remix, and the second time they get to the bridge, the guitar just increases in volume throughout it. That again gives it that power to make you go, ah, yeah, there is something here. And I think that's worth noting too. Um, we get some harmonization as well. By this point they're kind of doing it off pat. But actually, I think it is worth thinking about the structure of the song as well. We do get that stop start element, which dear listener knows that I like, but we have the vocal start to it. We get a sense of building throughout, and then when we get to the end, we have things being removed from it so that it ends not just as it starts with just the vocal, but you do get the vocal along with Ringo on percussion, and then a little mournful guitar piece at the end as well. So they're throwing quite a lot at it, and I think that is indicative of the fact that they had quite a lot of time to think about it, having started it in June with the Help session, the very last thing they attempted for Help, and then bringing it back in the Rubber Soul sessions as well. So there's a period of a few months where they could have attacked it with a few things. And I would be really interested to know how it sounded in June compared to how it sounded then later in the year. What was it? October, I think. It'll be really, really fascinating to know what they kept and then what they added.
Yeah, this isn't one that crops up on Anthology. I'm sure there must be bootlegs out there which have help session versions on it, but it's not something that crops up on Anthology. So there's no, I was going to say there's no real way. Of course, there's plenty of real way. There's no legal way for us to actually be able to
Yeah.
confirm what it would have sounded like back in the day. I mean, I do agree with what you're saying, but also it's just, I don't know, there's something slightly draining about, no, even draining is not quite the right word. It's a little enervating, perhaps, is the word I'm looking for. I, Again, it's that volume pedal, which I'm not. It's that, which is the wah, wah, which I'm not really a massive fan of its use here. And I wasn't the last time we came across it either. I know what it's striving for, but it just feels like it saps a lot of the energy out of the song. You're right about that 2009 remix. I think it is a bit superior, and it does, that build up in the guitar does help to give it a little bit of drive. It gives it a little bit of energy, and I think that's something that the song lacks. It's a song where I'm not really convinced that the lyrics and the music match up particularly well either. I think the lyrics are one of the weakest things in this song. They feel very generic. And whilst, I mean, you're not wrong about the effort which is being put in musically. It's a shame that that effort isn't really being matched by the lyric. I think you could have this music with an effective lyric, which was that slightly almost soporific kind of downbeat feel to it. But that's not what these lyrics have. It's, I'll wait till you come back, but, don't, I won't delay, I'll be back, blah, 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 wait for me, all this kind of stuff. It's pretty hacky. And they're better than this lyric at this point. They can just write much stronger lyrics, but it's not providing a contrast in a way that I think is particularly interesting. The fact that the lyrics are doing one thing and the music is doing another thing, that of course can drive any number of utterly brilliant songs. But I don't think that this is particularly one of them. They just don't feel like they're meshing particularly well together.
I think musically, the especially the verse into the what we will call a chorus does work really, really well. You know, I haven't delved too much into the lyrics because of their their standard nature. MacDonald refers to a sequence of heroic romantic cliches neither of its writers seem to have believed in. And it, you know, there's something in that. That's fine. And maybe then it was actually November when they came back to it. It was on the last day they were in the studio for this album that it was then brought back for recording. So maybe they had thought about it musically, but just kind of been in the situation where this will do for the lyrics. Which would make sense. I mean, it was recorded on the same day as You Won't See Me and Girl. So we're really in the situation where they're having pressure put on them in order to get things done. And maybe that's why perhaps things aren't worked to the degree that some others are. And remember, this is not how bands operate these days. This is crazy that they basically were then told, right, okay, last day in the studio, 3 songs, fill out the album. Okay, everyone, here we go. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just, bizarre. Especially when you've a band that are as successful as they are, that you're not then prepared to say, okay, well, tell you what, we'll give you another 36 hours.
Yeah, well, it's that whole thing about nothing being led by creativity. It's purely being led by commercialism,
Yeah.
even when, a band like the Beatles are making this massive step forward. But I mean, that is kind of a historical artifact. This really is the first time a band is being driven by something other than commerciality, I suppose. It is, properly developing as an art form of music in this way. And on the one hand, that's incredibly visible to us because we're looking at it from a distance of more than half a century. But on the other hand, it's understandable why that isn't the case, contemporaneously. And, some things will be simply down to, the practicalities of producing music. It has to go to a lathe. It has to be physically pressed. It has to, I don't want to get into a whole thing about industrial relations in the 1960s in the British record pressing industry, but, let's say industry wasn't always as flexible as one might need it to be in some circumstances, and we'll just leave it there at that. If there were deadlines to be met, there were deadlines to be met, and that is the end of the story. So yeah, you're right. Like an extra 36 hours, it seems so trivial, but that's not how things operated in the day. And
I mean, I suspect as well that the important thing was to get the record out before Christmas as
absolutely,
well.
yes.
But it was released on the 3rd of December in the UK. So it could have been released on the 10th of December. But, the record industry has been through so many changes and it was clearly working in a way that it thought was appropriate. When you think today we have that weird use of the word drop to indicate when an artist is suddenly releasing a record to the internet without anyone having known that it was being made available. It does seem as though the way in which, well, it doesn't seem as though they are, the way in which things are released is completely and utterly different. So it's a new industry and it's learning its ways. And as much as we would say about other things, give it another 12 months and it would learn a completely different way of doing things. Give it another 10 years, and again, it will have evolved significantly on the backs of what the Beatles were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a casualty of that whole rigidity in the music industry is perhaps the lyric of this song. It's, although that sounds to sort of frame it in those terms. But,
Yeah.
there's a deadline. Oh, well, we don't have time to rework this. This is fine. Like lyrically, it's not a disaster area. It's just bog standard kind of, okay, here's a thing that we can sing along to these chords. And that's all right. But also this follows in my life. So, it's certainly going to suffer by contrast to that. And it just, yeah, like I said, we know they can do so much better. So it will become increasingly rare that we get songs like this with such a kind of throwaway lyric to them. But it's every time we come across them now, it just feels that little bit disappointing because we know that things have just moved on from this.
It is, Bo, if you're not a reader of McDonald's book, and we have mixed opinions about it here on this podcast, it is worth reading his what he writes about weight, because he clearly really doesn't like some bits and clearly really does quite like some other bits. But some of his writing can be absolutely hilarious at times. When he talks about the harmony's ostentatious rise of over an octave is more like McCartney, that's one thing. But then when he's talking about McCartney, he says he probably contributed the rather insipid middle eight. You just think, yeah, actually, do you know what? I don't mind the ostentatious rise in the harmony. I quite like the harmonies in this because I think it does something a little bit different in places. But yeah, middle eight, bridge, whatever, insipid, I think is just about right.
Yeah, I would agree.
But it doesn't. But it doesn't take away from the fact that, and I think this will come up, even more so in the next episode. Again, compare it to what contemporaries are doing, and it's a really effective pop song. It's just not up there with their very best work. So there's nothing for anyone to be embarrassed about here. It's really good, and it does provide a bit of zip as we get towards the end of the album, and it's fine. It's just not their best, and you get that sometimes. We will find in a couple of songs' time that we have a really strong song that is let down by an abominable lyric. That's fine. It happens. But there's as McCartney himself, as a great philosopher, would have written in about 15 years' time, there is good and bad in everyone.
Well, who could disagree with a sentiment like that? That's what I'd like to know. Well, that sounded like a very concluding paragraph you were saying there. So shall we move towards scores?
Yeah, I think it's a solid 6.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go for exactly the same. It's fine. I can't get that much worked up to say any more about it. It's fine.
Yeah, that's the reason why we have podcast listens in the hundreds rather than the thousands. This is like the greatest thing since the last greatest thing.
Well, that's one reason, certainly. Okay, let's draw the line there, and we shall move on with our lives. You can really get a hold of us. We hope that you will, and we really enjoy discussing your emails, as we did at the top of this episode. You can contact us by email at BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We are on the shoddy remains of Twitter at Beatles_OG, and we are Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot, where I talk about music and films and TV shows and restaurants and whatever I fancy, really. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you are using so that people can find the show. Next episode, we have If I Needed Someone. And as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But until then, keep listening.